The air in the room was thick with the scent of dried lavender and the salty tang of the Narragansett Bay blowing through the window slats. Mary lay small against the great linen pillows, her breath a soft, rhythmic rasp that seemed to sync with the ticking of the hearth clock. Around her, the room was a tapestry of the life she and John had built from the wild Rhode Island soil. Young Peter sat on the edge of the mattress, his small hand wrapped around her weathered fingers. He marveled at how soft her skin felt, like worn parchment, and how tightly she squeezed back whenever a familiar name was spoken. Beside him, 2-year-old John was uncharacteristically still, his wide eyes watching the dancing shadows cast by the embers in the fireplace. "Do you remember, Mother?" Samuel's voice was low, a gentle rumble in the quiet room. "The day Father finished the chimney? You told him if he built it any bigger, the smoke would reach the moon." A faint, ghostly dimple appeared in Mary's cheek. That chimney, the great stone sentinel of their home, was a monument to a man who loved her with every heavy rock he hauled. It was the heart of the house, the place where she had boiled the sweetest corn and squash the colonies had ever seen, grown from seeds she'd tended with a prayer and a hoe. Her 2 grown daughters leaned against the bedpost, whispering of simpler times. They laughed through tears, reminding Mary of the days they spent by the shore, skipping oyster shells across the water until their arms ached, and how proud she was they learned to speak the soft, rolling vowels of the Narragansett tongue so they could walk in peace with their neighbors. Elizabeth, Samuel's wife, sat nearest to Mary's ear, her hand resting on her own heavy, restless belly. The new life stirred within her, a child Mary would never hold, yet a child who already carried Mary's spirit. "We'll tell him about his grandmother," Elizabeth whispered, leaning close. "We'll tell him about the woman who turned a wilderness into a garden." The conversation drifted, as it always did, to Joshua. The room grew stiller then, but the sadness was edged with a strange, sweet comfort. They spoke of him not as a man of war or tragedy, but as the boy who couldn't stay still, the one who was always leaping stone walls and disappearing into the high branches of the oak trees. "He's running through the woods of heaven now," Samuel said, his voice cracking, "and I imagine he's keeping the Lord quite busy trying to keep up with him." Mary's eyes flickered open for a final, brief moment. She looked at the faces surrounding her, the legacy of a woman who had survived the harshest winters and the deepest sorrows. She felt the warmth of Peter's hand and the phantom weight of the baby Elizabeth carried. She wasn't looking at the room anymore. She was looking at the door. In her mind, the great chimney was roaring with a fire that never went out. Standing by the mantel was John, his hands clean of the dust of the earth, reaching out to her just as he had on the day they wed. And behind him, a young man was waving from the tree-line, ready to show her the way. Mary took a final, deep breath, a long sigh of relief. A smile, bright and certain, settled onto her lips. She let go of the earth, knowing she was leaving behind a world full of her love, and stepping into a kingdom where her heart was finally whole again. The flickering shadows of the great stone chimney stretched long across the floor, like reaching fingers that couldn't quite touch the woman in the bed. The room was silent, save for the muffled, rhythmic sound of Elizabeth in the kitchen, her voice a low, melodic hum as she rocked the little ones, offering them spoonfuls of honeyed bread and prayers that tasted like salt. But in the bedroom, time had stopped. The 3 siblings sat in a semicircle, their shoulders touching, a physical wall against the cold that had begun to settle into the corners of the house. They didn't speak. To speak would be to admit that the woman who had survived the starving time, the woman who had negotiated peace in a language that wasn't her own, and the woman who had outlived her husband and her son, was finally still. Their hearts felt like the very stones their father had used for the hearth, heavy, cold, and unmovable. "She looks like she's just listening," his sister whispered, her hand trembling as she reached out to straighten the lace on Mary's cap. "Listening for the tide to come in." One by one they stood, the finality of the moment pressed down on them like the weight of the Rhode Island sky. The first sister leaned in, her tears falling onto the woolen blanket, and kissed Mary's forehead. Then the second, lingering long enough to whisper a secret only a mother could keep. When it was Samuel's turn, he felt his legs weaken. He leaned down and pressed his lips to her brow. She smelled faintly of the rosemary she'd hung to dry just last week. A scent of life and healing that felt like a cruel irony now. "Rest, mother," he breathed. "We have the watch now." The sisters retreated, their heavy skirts sweeping the floor, leaving Samuel in a silence so profound it rang in his ears. He sat back down, holding her hand, the hand that had taught him how to plant, how to hold a tool, and how to be kind. He held it until the warmth left it entirely, a slow, agonizing transition that broke the last of his composure. He wept then, not as a leader of the community or a father himself, but as a boy lost in the woods. Desperate for a way to hold on to her, Samuel stood and began to search the room. His eyes landed on her small writing desk, tucked away near the window where she used to watch the sunrise. There, bound in worn deer hide, lay her journal. He pulled out the chair, the wood groaning in the quiet. He opened the book to the first blank page, the scent of her ink and old paper rising to meet him. His hand shook as he dipped the quill. He didn't want to write about the end. He wanted to write about the bridge she had built between the old world and the new.
To my dearest mother, constant, kind, in every beat of my heart and space in my mind, your gentle touch, your warming smile, has made this world so bright, so worthwhile. From the first step I took, unsure and small, to every hurdle I've faced through it all, you were my guide, my guiding star, no matter near or however far. Your unconditional love, a warm embrace, leaves its unique and comforting trace. A beacon of strength through life's rocky sea. You've made me the man I'm destined to be. I've watched you flourish and I've watched you bloom, chasing away the heaviest of shadows, the deepest of gloom. With grace and wit you've conquered it all, picking me up whenever I did fall. The stories you've told, the lessons you've shared, the simple moments when I knew you cared. Through every challenge, big and small, you've always been my very all-encompassing call. So now I write this humble ode for the sweetest woman on this entire abode. My mother, my mentor, my truest friend, with love that will never, ever truly end. The fire in the great chimney has gone out, but the house is not dark. I sit here in the chill of her absence and realize that she was the hearth. My sisters have kissed her for the last time, and the children sleep with her name on their lips. She told us once that the Narragansetts say we are all made of the earth we walk upon. If that is true, then the soil of this colony is holy, for it holds her sweat, her tears, and now her rest. Father built the chimney, but mother was the flame. I will tend the fire now, so that the child Elizabeth carries will never feel the cold.
Samuel closed the book, his thumb lingering on the cover. He looked back at his mother's peaceful face and, for the first time that night, he felt a small, flickering spark of warmth begin to grow in the center of his chest. He stood, blew out the final candle, and walked into the morning.